All right, so welcome everybody to the January 2022. I still can't get used to saying that edition of the second Tuesday Zoom podcast that put on by Friends of the Savannah Coastal Wildlife Refuges. Just a reminder that previous episodes and this one will be posted on our YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and search for Friends of the Savannah Coastal Wildlife Refuges, it should pop up. Just a little housekeeping. I did want to send a shout out to David and Rosemary Smith in Bluffton for a nice contribution that they sent us, along with a contribution from the Sun City Bird Club in memory of Judy Glazer, who unfortunately passed away last month. So we do appreciate that very much, especially in a time when our activities are so curtailed and we have not been able to do our normal fundraising activities. That any kind of activity, any kind of donations and membership renewals at this point are really helpful. Tonight's program is going to be presented by Cathy Sakas, who is many of you know, I believe. She's been active in our area in wildlife pursuits for very many years now. Well, I shouldn't say very many, but for some time now anyway. She is very active in a number of projects, including the Gray's Reef Project, the Tybee Beach Project. In the announcement for this meeting, there are a number of listed of things that she's been involved with, but she is also known as the Swamp Goddess because of her tours that she does, particularly within the Okefenokee, and that's going to be the topic of her talk tonight. So what I would suggest, if you have questions at all for Cathy during the presentation, that you post them in the chat window. If you go to the chat box at the bottom and just type in, and I'll moderate the chat, the questions, and that we'll put those to her at the end of the session. Or if they seem particularly pertinent, I might interrupt her if that's okay, Cathy, and with a question that seems more pressing at that time. So, but otherwise, let's go ahead and get started. Cathy, you have the presentation window. It's all yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me. You know, the work that you all do on behalf of the Savannah Wildlife Refuges is huge. I know I have been, the last 15 years of my career, I was a federal employee, and I know how critically important volunteer work is in any kind of federal agency. We were always strapped for money, so having volunteers to help out was huge. So thank you very much for being involved, no matter what level you're involved in. So my topic tonight is obviously the Okefenokee Swamp. This, to me, it's one of the most beautiful places on earth, and how lucky are we to have it right in our own backyard. And I feel very privileged to be able to go. It's a 2-hour drive for me if I want to go to the east side of the swamp, but if I want to go to the west side of the swamp, a little longer, about 3.5 to 4 hours. But anyway, so what I wanted to do tonight is to, this is kind of like a stream of consciousness of how I enjoy the swamp. And so there are so many different habitats within the Great Okefenokee Swamp, which is, by the way, the largest freshwater swamp that we have in North America, blackwater swamp that we have in North America. And so we'll just get started. There, okay. So one of the most amazing things to me about the Okefenokee are the vistas that you see. You can be in really tight little closed areas, but the beautiful landscapes that you see. This is looking from the south end of Billy's Lake up to the north end. And of course, this is in the fall. The swamp has its own climate. You can look at the weather and you can think, okay, it's going to be dry, but no matter what time of year you go, you better bring your raincoat. You better bring your rain gear, because there's always going to be moisture, whether it's from a very heavy dew morning or whether you're going to get a pop-up shower along the way. The climate, the swamp generates its own climate because it is such a vast wetlands, and it's just beautiful. I've had the privilege of flying over it a couple of times. It took me a while to find a pilot that even wanted to fly over the swamp. They were a little intimidated, I guess, thinking that if we went down, we wouldn't get out. I assured them that I had my Swiss Army knife and we would get out. So the many images of the swamp, every day it changes. I've been in this, I think I've led about 350, more than 350 overnight trips. And those overnight trips have ranged from one night up to 4 nights. 5 days, 4 nights is the longest you can be in there. And so each time I go in, there's a different, you always see something different. You may be in the same place, but it's always going to look differently. So on the left of the screen is Moonrise from Coffee Bay Shelter. And on the right side of the screen is Moonset over Cedar Hammock, which is in the Mizell Prairie. So to me, it's all about, you know, the wilderness, about getting out and exercising, using your muscles, looking at these incredible scenes that you see. But the nice thing is it's for all ages. The youngest I've ever had was a 6-month-old baby that the parents wanted to come. So they took their child in a little bassinet that sat in the bottom of the canoe. And the oldest was 90 years old. Now, the gentleman lied about his age. He told me that he was 74 and that he was going to turn 75. And then when the night came and we actually brought out the 75 candles and he blew them out, somebody quite innocently asked him how old he was. And he blurted out, "I'm 90. I nearly had a heart attack. But anyway. And so when you're on the trails, you're looking at or you're paddling through trails that are lined with lily pads. These happen to be spatterdock or yellow water bonnet, but you're guided by these signs that you see along the way. And they always tell you what, you know, what direction a particular landmark that you might be wanting to go to. So Minnie's Lake is, you know, essentially a big bulge in a river. Now the headwaters of the Suwannee River originate in the Okefenokee. So about 85% of the water that flows out of the swamp goes into the Suwannee River that flows into the Gulf of Mexico to the west, to the southwest. About 15% flows into the St. Mary's River, which is the border between Florida and Georgia in the south. And so the St. Mary's River to me is just really an incredible river, because how many rivers do you know that flows south, then east, then north, then east again? Not too many. And that is the St. Mary's. It's following that path around the eastern lip of the swamp, which is Trail Ridge. And that's the area that's in question right now or in threat of being mined by Twin Pines. So the Okefenokee is a subtropical climate. And one of the indicators is that when the leaves come out, like on the spatterdock, the plant doesn't go to the expense of putting chlorophyll into the leaf until it's been out a while, until it either survives for a couple of days and does not get eaten up by insects. And then the plant goes to the trouble of putting that chlorophyll, or that expense of putting that chlorophyll into the leaf, and it will turn green. Of course, fragrant white water lilies are always gorgeous. And there are many insects that dine off of these leaves. So you see the lily pads will have almost trails through the leaf of the lily pad, where the caterpillars from moths are dining on the leaves. Of course, alligators are a big presence. It's estimated that there's maybe 10,000 to 13,000 alligators in the swamp. This particular image I thought was great. It was taken by a friend of mine at night. I didn't even know the gator was there. And you really don't know they're there most of the time, unless you've got a, let me backtrack on that. At night, you may not know they're there unless you shine a light out, and then you see their eyes shining back. And what you're hitting upon is the reflection of the layer that's behind the retina. It's called the tapetum lucidum, and that is the reflective layer that that the light going through the retina bounces off that back layer and goes back through the retina, so exciting the rods in the eye twice so that they can see very well at night. But their eyes literally shine back a rosy red, which is pretty cool. So the trails of the canoe trails are designed in the swamp so that if your group, your party, and it can be a party of 1 up to 20, I do not recommend taking 20 people through the swamp on one platform. That would be, that's really crowded. But your canoe party is the only party that will be on that trail. So you're likely not to see anybody else. Occasionally your paths will cross. Okay, that's just an artsy picture of what my canoe looks like with my paddling gloves and other equipment that I find necessary to go into the swamp. So these mile markers mark the trail. And at this point, you would be on the second day of the red trail. The red trail, you enter at Kingfisher Landing on the central eastern side of the swamp. You go north and then for about 14 miles. And at this point is when you make the big left-hand turn, which takes you down what I call your start the magic carpet ride, because at that point you are then with the current, and it's a great thing. The first 14 miles you're going through prairie, which is really quite lovely. But if you happen to be in a wind, and you will always be in a wind at some point on your paddle in the swamp, it can be a little daunting or maybe tiring. And if you're lucky enough, like me, to have a umbrella handy, you can capture the wind and be a Mary Poppins in the swamp. It works for a little while. In the swamp, of course, the main things to me is being out there so that you're connected with everything that's around you. This is one of 2 platforms that provide a 360-degree view of the prairie. Now this is, we're at Cedar Hammock. This is Mizell Prairie. And you're not supposed to have a fire on the platforms, and you will see scarring from people who have tried to have fires. Not a good idea. I have a little setup from a solo camp stove that with a mat that is a heat barrier, and then it's just a little, like a little gallon paint can that you can stick a fire in. So the swamp has many different habitats, and so the 2 main ones are the prairie area, which is this big open expanse, and out in the prairie, it can be both breathtakingly beautiful and again daunting if you happen to get into a wind or a lightning storm. And the last time I was in the swamp, which was just a couple of weeks ago, I took 4 young men in there, and I told them, I said, you know, I'm old enough to be your grandmother. Is that okay? Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We'll do whatever you tell us to do. Just tell us about the swamp. And I said, all right, fair enough. And but the cool thing was that I learned about non-fungible tokens and blockchain and bitcoins. I didn't know about that, but anyway, they taught me all of that, and I taught them about the swamp. I thought that was a fair exchange. But anyway, when you're in the swamp, you are you're out there, and so it's really up to you to make the most of it. But I'll tell you what, the scenery can be breathtakingly beautiful. This is sunset over Buzzard Lake, or excuse me, Buzzard Roost. And for a long time, I would not go to one of the platforms called Monkey Lake. To tell you the truth, I was just a snob about it. I just thought, why would you name a place Monkey Lake? Well, Monkey Lake is named that because of all of the barred owls that hoot. And they do sound like monkeys certain times of the year with their pair bonding calls. But I'll tell you what, the scenery is spectacular. So you go to Monkey Lake platform, you set up your tent, and then before sunset, you paddle out to another half mile out to Buzzard Roost, and it is just stunningly beautiful. So along the way, you get to see critters, and this is a yellow-bellied slider, I say doing yoga on a peat blow up, and you just never know what you're going to see. It's astounding to me that the number of turtles that you see that are right next to a very large alligator. And if the turtle has the wherewithal, the luck to survive up to that size, even the largest gator can't crack that shell. That shell is a dome, and the dome is one of the strongest structures in nature. Well, I showed you what Cedar Hammock looked like. This is a day shelter along the Suwannee Canal, the famous Suwannee Canal. And Suwannee Canal was dug. It's a man-made ditch, basically, that is on the central eastern side of the swamp. And it was dug back in the late 1800s, early 1900s by Colonel Harry Jackson. And the sole purpose of it was to drain the swamp. Well, had he not died of appendicitis, he probably would have accomplished that. And the Okefenokee that we cherish and love today would probably not be, it would probably be an agribusiness, which is what he was trying to make it into. So we're sorry that he died, but on the other hand, I think it was divine intervention. So this is one of the platforms this is Round Top, and this is one of my favorite platforms. It doesn't, I'm sorry, this is not Round Top. This is Big Water. I'm sorry, Mall Hammock. And if you want to be transformed back into what I consider the Cenozoic, when with reptiles, now this is Round Top. It has one of the most incredible frog choruses you will ever hear in your life. It is so loud, it is deafening. And you can pick out, just like bird calls, you can identify the bird by the call. Well, you can identify frogs by the calls too. And they're so entertaining. It's just really remarkable. And this is also Mall Hammock. And you can see there is a yellow kayak. I have paddled a kayak into the swamp, but you're probably better off if you go with a canoe, just because you can stand up. Some of the days you paddle 12 to 15 miles and there's really no place to stand up. So it's a little hard to do in a kayak, but at least in a canoe, you can stand up and get the blood going in the places where the blood has not been flowing because you've been sitting down for a long time. Oh, and you can see that that's only 3 tents. There's only 3 of us on this platform. Now, can you imagine trying to stack 20 people on there? That would be a minimum of 10 tents. Not a good thing to do. And so again, the swamp has so many different moods. And early in the morning, this is what a misty morning looks like from Round Top, which is the other 360-degree view. Oh, and I've been in the swamp. What was it? Haley Bopp. I was in the swamp when Haley Bopp comet was visible, and my gosh, that's spectacular. I don't have any night scenes, and that's too bad. I need to work on that, because when you're out in the swamp, it's just amazing to see a sky that is not occluded by the lights. And that's one of the issues that would happen if we allowed Twin Pines to mine the titanium out of Trail Ridge on the eastern side of the swamp. My understanding is that the operation would be 24 hours, 365 days a year. And not only would the noise be a factor, and the disruption of the hydrology, but it would also be light pollution. And that is one of the things that I cherish about going in the swamp and spending the night there, is just seeing that incredible sky, especially when there's no moon and there's no clouds. It's just spectacular to see that many stars. I actually had a guy cry, a 42-year-old dentist from Jacksonville. And I asked him, why was he crying? And he said, because he had never seen the sky like that before. And I said, how not? How couldn't you not? And he says, never been outside of Jacksonville city limits. So he had never seen a darkened sky. I'm like, wow, glad he was seeing it then. Okay, I got a lot of little animal shots here and there, but one of the most incredible video footages I've ever seen is of about a 15-foot alligator trying to chomp a yellow-bellied slider. And again, that dome is so incredibly strong, and the upper palate of the alligator is so flat, so straight, that it could not, I mean, I was definitely pulling for the turtle, and you hear it crunch, but the shell never cracked, and eventually the turtle got free. Spoiler alert, if you ever see that video. And so these beasts are what we call the last of the ruling reptiles. And you can tell the size of an alligator. Now, I'm sure that you all have been into the refuge and seen plenty of alligators, but they never cease to fascinate me. They are just really, truly amazing animals. And the largest I've ever seen in the swamp, 15 feet. And when you have a 17.5-foot canoe and a 15-foot alligator is right beside your canoe, it's a little, you take note. You don't want to make a sudden move or anything like that. You just let it go. That used to happen all the time when I first started going into the swamp back in the early 70s or mid 70s, because the fishermen were still trailing their catch on stringers over the side. And so, of course, the alligators got habituated to seeing those fish on the stringer. So whenever they saw a boat and a canoe, was no exception, they would come and look for that free handout. I think my worst nightmare happened probably 5 years into leading trips into the swamp, when I had a little girl and her father flipped. And I thought, well, that's it. But not to their credit, not one alligator moved a muscle, didn't even come close to making an approach for that little girl. So I was quite relieved. Of course, we made enough noise. I doubt the alligator would have just wasn't going to come over there. But the interesting thing is that the father had just put his money belt off of his waist into the bottom of the canoe, and he had $350 in that money belt. And of course, it went to the bottom of the swamp, and he told me that I needed to dive in and get his money belt. And I said, if I dive in and get that money belt, that money's mine. I didn't dive in. So there are an amazing amount of birds in the Okefenokee. And of course, this is a female anhinga doing what we call solar collecting. I used to call it drying her wings, but she's really what ornithologists say now is solar collecting. They have very reduced oil glands, but that helps them to go into the water and spear fish under the bottom, grab fish under the bottom. And so the lack of oil, or the reduced amount of oil, facilitates that diving underneath the water. The first time I saw one diving under the water, I was shocked, because it was the weirdest looking fish I'd ever seen, until I realized, of course, it was a bird. Many different, several different species of owls. Of course, this is a great horned owl. They're hard to get a photo of, but managed to snap that one. And my favorite birds have to be the vultures, and these are turkey vultures. And I used to I occasionally will produce a documentary for Georgia Public Television or for whoever. And one of my favorite segments was on birds. And I know people thought, if they had been observing me, they thought I was a crazy woman because I was collecting roadkills so I could provide food for the vultures to come in. And my cameraman got the most amazing footage of vultures. It was just spectacular. And of course, every now and then again, I get a lucky shot that's a little blurry, but in reality, it is quite lovely. The alabaster white of the feathers against that dark green background. And of course, gators. We're always fascinated by gators. These are young ones. They're probably about 4 feet long. In my past life, I have helped Jim Tamarack and John Crawford tag alligators on Wausau Island. And my limit of capturing a gator is about 4 feet. That's about all the gator I can handle. But I've seen those guys go after 8-footers and even a 10-footer, which is really something to see. I don't recommend that you try that at home. And again, I get lucky with these shots, and just the beauty and the grace of these great blue herons and all of the egrets and all of the herons that we see in the Okefenokee. These people always ask me, well, what eats alligators? Well, I actually saw a great blue heron slurp down 2 hatchling alligators. And I was quite stunned by that. I just like, wow, I had no idea. But there they were. I mean, watched them do it. And but of course, I'm sure Mama Gator was alerted to the little yelps of the other gators, of the other hatchlings, and came in and protected her clutch. So this was my money shot. I had been wanting to get sandteal cranes. These are Florida sandteal cranes. And to tell you the truth, I don't even take a camera in the swamp anymore. It's my cell phone. The cell phones are such good quality. Now this doesn't look really good quality, but it is. I don't know what happened with these slides, but and it's just amazing what you can take with your phone. But whenever you go into the swamp, I always tell people to put your phone on airplane mode. Otherwise, you'll lose the battery because there's really no cell phone coverage in the swamp, and your phone just keeps searching and searching. So, but the only problem is with a phone is that you can't really see the screen in full sunlight. So you just kind of get it up there and start clicking away. And that was one of the surprises when I got home. I was like, this is great. Florida sandteal cranes. The last count I heard, maybe about 80 nesting pair 40 nesting pair, 80 individuals in the swamp. They mate for life. Occasionally there's a divorce, but usually they go for life. And these are called, these kind of birds are very successful in raising chicks. They usually have 2 eggs, and then they could raise those chicks because they depend on each other. They know that their mate is reliable and is a good parent. Of course, there's nothing more beautiful than seeing a white bird in greenery. Just lovely. Great egret. And so, some of the flowers, this of course is the tick-seed sunflowers, and this is what you see in the fall. These are the fall asters. In the background, you can see the charred trunks of the trees. We've had several fires that went through the swamp, and usually are in the past, up until I guess it was about the 70s, I got a call from the swamp wanting to know what I thought about, and not just me, they were calling a bunch of different naturalists that had gone into the swamp, and they were asking whether or not we were in favor of allowing the sill to be breached. I was definitely in favor of letting the sill be breached. The sill was built in the early 1950s to artificially elevate the water on the southwestern corner of the swamp after a fire was so intense that it shut down Jacksonville for about 2 months. There was so much smoke. So the CCC, I think that's right, CCC, Coastal Conservancy, built an 8-mile berm, literally a berm on the southwestern corner of the swamp to elevate that water so that that swamp wouldn't burn. Well, now we know that fire is an important part of the ecology of the swamp. And we have the second or third highest frequency of lightning strikes in North America in the Okefenokee Swamp, southeastern Georgia, northeastern and north central Florida. So it's a part of the landscape. Oh, more turtles. And again, you can see they're kind of doing yoga. The one in the back anyway, with its legs outstretched. Yellow-bellied sliders. In the springtime, when you're paddling, you go through long stretches of lily pad lined trails. Now, if you're fortunate enough, there's enough water and you can just kind of sail through. But trying to make your way through all of those lily pads really will take a toll on you. So usually the swamp will, probably in early March, we'll go through with what we call a roto-rooter, which is a boat that has a propeller on the front that reams out the trails so that it's a little more easily to pass through. And again, I just love the vistas that you see. The reflectability of the mirrored surface is just phenomenal. This water, I've measured the pH to be about, the lowest I've measured it to be was 3.7. And on the pH scale, that's highly acidic. When you think about tap water, rainwater is usually about 7. And if you drop down to 6, then 6 is 10 times more acidic than 7. If you drop down to 5, 5 is 100 times more acidic than 7. You drop down to 4, now you're 1,000 times more acidic than 7, which is neutral rainwater or tap water. So you can see with a pH of 3.7, this is pretty darn acidic, and not too much bacteria or fungi grows in this water. It's there, but it's not nearly what you would find in other habitats. So consequently, what we're doing every day is brewing tea. We are making tea in these black water swamps and black water rivers every day. The debris from the leaf litter, the bark, the trees themselves, the plants, put all of that leaf litter or plant material into the swamp. And then because the swamp water is relatively warm year round and slow moving, it really steeps the tannins out of that plant debris. So we get black water rivers. That allows for the peat to build up. So in some places, the peat layers, which is just plant matter, plant debris, builds up. And in some cases, it may be 100 feet deep. Well, if you put your paddle down in that muck, and you can see the brown area in the forescreen there, you're going to release the methane. The methane is a byproduct of decomposition of the fungus and the bacteria, but it is very slow decomposing process. So the peat builds up, and eventually that methane builds up under the peat, and you get what is called a peat blowup. And as soon as that peat blowup makes it to the surface, it is so fertile. It is incredibly fertile soil. And as soon as it hits that oxygen, any seeds that fall on it from the air or that are pooped on it by birds starts growing almost immediately. It's just quite amazing. And of course, the alligators will take advantage of these peat blowups. Not unusual to see them. And this one is very well fed. You can see the jowl right behind the jaw. That's a chubby gator. He's really had a good good season of fishing. And again, the reflections on the water are just stunning, and especially on a calm day. Sometimes I get these pictures back and you can flip them over and you can't tell which is the real image and which is the reflection. The swamp is a very nitrogen poor environment, and consequently, the plants have been able to get around that deficiency by taking nitrogen directly from insects that have fed on other plants, right? So this is a tiny, not tiny, diminutive carnivorous plant called a sundew. I guess one of its close relatives would be the Venus flytrap, but these are quite stunning. The hair projections that are coming up off of the pad, the leaf pad, those are the sticky filaments that come up, and the digestive juices, well, the sticky part, droplets on the end of the filaments that are coming up off the leaf pad capture the insect, and then the leaf literally folds in around the insect, and then on the pad itself are the digestive enzymes. So it gets its nitrogen directly from the insects that happen to be attracted to these red plants. Red is a big color for attracting insects, and these are the parrot pitcher plants. This is another carnivorous plant, and you can see the flower stalks off to the left of the screen. And the leaf is modified so that it's actually like a big vase that traps. So the insect is attracted into the lip where there's a nice little fragrance, and then there's hair-like projections that point downward. So once the insect is inside that leaf trap, it's trapped for good, and there's really no way out. And then to further deception, on the back of the hood of that pitcher plant looks like windows. So the insect is attracted to those windows as possibly a way out, but nope, no dice. It's just another trick. And so off to the left, you can see another type of pitcher plant, which is the hooded pitcher plant. And again, it's the same strategy. The leaf is made into a tube, and that has digestive enzymes at the base of that. In the middle is my cousin, my very lightweight cousin, Megan, who lives in Richmond Hill. She's a pharmacist. And we've gone through the swamp several times, and she wanted to have the experience of walking on a peat blow up. Well, she's so light, she doesn't really move the peat too much. But when you get some big guys out there, it can look like a trampoline just on that very soggy earth. So that is supposedly what the name Okefenokee means, land of the trembling earth. Another interpretation is shaking waters. So however way you want to do it, it is a derivation of a Cherokee, of a Creek Indian word. Anything that ends in EE, like Ogeechee, Ohoopee, Withlacoochee, Oconee, Okmulgee, EE, all of those are indicative of a water source. And of course, off to the right is the Golden Club with a beautiful dragonfly just emerging. And another peat blow up with a very jowly alligator. I was paddling. I took my kayak in, I guess, because I was with the guys, those 4 guys, and I knew they would probably out paddle me. I was wrong. There's nothing that is quite as good as experience and paddling technique. Over the years, I've developed a good technique. And what I didn't realize was I wasn't watching my 4 guys who told me they could paddle. And I couldn't quite figure out the first night why they were so tired. They were 18 through 24 years old, brothers and cousins. And the next day when I told them that they could lead and I would follow because we were just going to retrace our steps for a couple of miles, I realized why they were so tired. They had paddled twice as far as I had because they were doing the zigzag thing. Next time I'll check if somebody tells me they can paddle. Again, the reflectivity of the water surface is phenomenal. And, you know, these are really healthy alligators. When you look at that body and you see that tail is so thick. And that tail, by the way, is a counterbalance to that very heavy head. So when you see an alligator walk on land, I hope you do, it's quite, you get the sense that these are incredibly ancient animals, and they are. They've been around for 180 million years. It's amazing. And but that big old head up there has to be counterbalanced so that they don't, you know, do a face plant. And that counterbalance is that tail, that very long tail in the back. So what I wanted to show you in this particular slide is the panel to the right, to the left is the boardwalk to Owl Roost. Now, when you go into the eastern, central eastern entrance to the swamp, it's Suwannee Canal Recreation Area right outside of Foxton, Georgia. And there's a wonderful, about 1.5 mile boardwalk that goes over, you start out in the uplands and then you go across the wetlands. And it's a beautiful way to see the swamp if you don't want to paddle and just get a quick overview. It's just stunningly beautiful. And then when you get to the very end, and if you look at the panel on the right, that is the Owl Roost Tower, and it goes up about 45 feet. It's well worth the climb, even if you might have a little bit of fear of heights or agoraphobia. It is, the scenery is quite beautiful. On one of my Georgia Public Television's Coastal Naturalist series, the nature series, I didn't trick them, but I did enhance a recording of another alligator bellowing to get a bull alligator to come in and bellow at the feet of my cameraman. It was quite a feat to pull off, but we did it through the enhancement of the bellow. And that bull gator was about 12 feet long. And every now and again, I'll be watching GPV. And we recorded that back in the 90s, early 90s, I think like 89, 90. And I still see that image pop up, or that clip pop up. And I was like, yeah, that's mine. Mitch shot that. And I know exactly where we shot it, at the base of Owl Roost. And then in the middle panel, you see the Suwannee Canal. And it's just, you know, sometimes I'll be paddling down it for 9 miles, 11 miles, and you just kind of get a little monotonous, but always you see something, you know, you see birds, you see turtles, and certainly a lot of alligators. But when it's windy, I want to tell you how happy you are to be in that canal, because it does provide protection. Just the little bit of difference in the elevation along the berm as the dredge spoil was, as the canal was being dug, the dredge spoil was put on the sides. And by the way, they were using a steam shovel powered by coal. And they elevated the sides of the swamp, of the canal, just a little bit. And it gave it just enough elevation to allow for trees to grow. So that's why you see the cypress trees and the hollies and the gums that are there. Otherwise, this would be just all prairie, which is quite lovely too. And so one of the phenomenons that, especially if you're on the eastern side of the swamp, is you will hear trains. And you'll hear trains about at least every half hour, if not every 20 minutes. And that's because this phenomenon is called the Foxton Funnel. The first time I heard that, I was like, what is the Foxton Funnel? And all it is all of the trains that are coming up and down the East Coast, going north and south, they get funneled through Foxton, because you've got the swamp to the west and you've got the Atlantic Ocean to the east. And so all of those rail lines just get squished in through Foxton. So if you want to watch trains, that's the place to go. And Foxton is on the central eastern side of the swamp. So I had to put that photo in there. But it also reminded me that one of the big parts of the swamp is its human history. It started out with Native Americans that populated it and hunted and fished there and took refuge there. Throughout the swamp, you find burial mounds from the Weeden Island culture, Indians, and where the first of those mounds to be breached was by the railroad workers who were just trying to dig so that they didn't have to lay extra track over the mound. They just thought they would dig through it and just put the track through it. Well, what they found was quite startling, because some of the skeletons, once you piece them together, made a 7-foot male. Oh, well, you think about that, that was 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. That's quite remarkable that people were that tall then. Well, you look down into Florida, into the Calusa culture, they too were 7 feet tall. So that can be, you know, most likely because they had excellent nutrition, excellent protein, but they probably also had a closed gene pool that got them into the taller end. But this particular structure is from the timbering. Once the Indians were more or less pushed out by settlers coming who were trying to expand. They wanted new places, so they came into the swamp, and there were confrontations, there were war parties, there were massacres. You don't just come in and take somebody's hunting ground without retribution. But eventually the white settlers won out, and eventually the swampers and the fur trade, the alligator hides, and the fishing eventually gave way to the timbering. And so cypress trees were a big part of that history. So and this is just the remnants of it. And this is approaching into the Floyd's Island. This is what it looks like when you've got a big group. This is the Georgia Conservancy, and I always do their and their naturalist. Friend of mine, we're on Floyd's Island, and this guy owns a couple of restaurants up in Atlanta, and he's a big deer hunter. So he was kind of drooling when he saw this deer, and I had to tell him that, yeah, this is a refuge, can't do that. And this is the cabin that still stands on Floyd's Island that was built by the Hubbard Lumber Company. And it's just a reminder that the swamp has had a long use of human history. This scene to me just brought back memories from my childhood with going to my grandparents' house out in my mother's side of the family out in rural North Carolina, and having to take a bath with pumped in water from a hand pump. I think I've already shown that image. I'm sure I have. But of course, the cypress knees of the cypress trees are, you can make all sorts of little gnomes out of them. And I always feel like I'm in a parade, and those are the parade watchers as you go by on your canoe or kayak. Some of you know this character, John Crawford, longtime friend, fellow naturalist. And I'm seeing that I am taking too long, so I'm going to start rushing now. I've only got a few more slides, and I hate to do that, but I don't want to keep you long, and I know that you all have some questions. Hope you do anyway. And so some of the flowers that you get to see are, again, this is another carnivorous plant, yellow bladderwort. The reflections, I don't need to say anything more about the reflections. It just captures my eyes. And then there's the flowers, the beautiful pinks and purples of the blue flag iris. It's just amazing when you see that, just that little bit of color in the distance. against that green and blue, just spectacular. And there's so many different shades, deep purples all the way to really pale lilacs. And this is a plant that I don't get to see real often. It's called a green water spider orchid, and I only see it in the fall up in Chase Prairie. And again, the orchids are just spectacular in the spring. The rose begonias are just beautiful. And these are highly sophisticated or highly evolved flowers because they have pollen stamps on so that if when a bee or an insect lands on that bottom lip, the top part stamps its back. Pollinates. Okay, some of you are going to freak out about this, but snakes are a part of the swamp. I know I get that all the time about, oh, you're going to have snakes fall in your canoe. Well, I've never had one fall in my canoe. I can actually smell them before I see them. And this is a brown water snake, which have very nasty tempers. I do see bears occasionally, but again, I smell them before I see them. They smell like a wet wool dog blanket is what they smell like. And you really can smell them before you see them. And this one came in right on the side of the road as you're going into the swamp because there was such a high yield of acorns that they just don't care about humans. They're just going to go after those acorns. We think there's about maybe 200 or so. Last count I heard of black bear in the swamp. Nothing better than to take a nap in your canoe. Friend of mine, I actually call him Water Bear. Oh yeah, so Swamp Goddess, that's the book I wrote, and some of the stories that I've been telling you are me in there. This is how it all got started. I am not self-named. I was named by this gentleman. This is from 1976. And the gentleman that has the dog in front of him, the elderly guy with the white hair and the white beard, kind of looks like a little bit of a chubby Colonel Sanders. That is Dr. Bob. And Dr. Bob, along with another Dr. Bob, would come on my trips, and they came on my trips for about 10 years before I caught on. But I overheard them talking about Swamp Goddess one afternoon, and I was confused because I had never heard that story before. Well, it turned out it was me. So I was a little annoyed at first, and then I thought, oh, no, I like that. I like that. So this is my friend Jim Bitler. I dedicated my book to him and to Dr. Bob because they both passed away, unfortunately. And I also dedicated it to these two individuals, Susanna Black and Dr. Tom Wills Kofer. I went through the swamp with them for probably 20 years, more than anybody. And so I felt like they needed to be part of the book too. And of course, you probably know the young lady smack dab in the middle. That's Miss Chris Williams Carroll. And I've been through the swamp with her quite a few times and these cast of characters. But that's all I've got for right now. Unless you all have questions, I'll be happy to take those.
Well, thank you so much for that presentation. That was some beautiful shots in there. I know it's a gorgeous place to spend time. If nobody else has any right off the bat, I've got a couple I'd like to ask you. First of all, where can we get your book? Is it in local bookstores? Is it on Amazon or what?
It is on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. And you can also go to the publisher, which is Maudlin Pond. That's Maudlin, the Maudlin, Maudlin Pond Press. And it's probably cheaper on Maudlin Pond Press. I think it's maybe $5 or $10 more on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And it's in bookstores, but I got an order for the books and I ran out, and So I had to go to the bookstore and get my books back.
Oh. And the other question, are you still doing tours? If anybody watching wanted to do a tour with you, how would they get a hold of you?
They can get my email address from you, I guess, or it's just cathyjosakas@gmail.com. Cathy with a C, CathyJosakas@gmail.com.
And do you have a website or anything where you make reservations, or just call you directly?
Call me directly.
Or email you.
Yeah, email me. And I do work through Okefenokee Adventures down in Foxton, Suwannee Canal Recreation Area. I lead trips for them too.
Okay.
So you can either go through them or go through me.
And I had one more. What are there any invasive species of concern right now that's a particular concern in the Okie?
I have not seen any. I know that, we have them all around, but really I haven't seen any that that are considered invasive yet. I'm sure, that will change at some point. But right now it seems to be pretty clear.
All right. Anybody else have any questions for Cathy? Well, let's see. I got one in the chat room here. Pythons. Any pythons so far?
No, have not seen any pythons. We're still a little cold for pythons. Now, I have gone through the Everglades. Used to go through there regularly, but not in the freshwater area. I only go into the 10,000 island area, which is saltwater. And I haven't seen any out there, but that's not to say that they're not there. I think they're more prevalent in the freshwater areas. That's much warmer than we are. Although
Yes.
that could change.
That certainly is a concern. I've heard that because of the damage they've done in the Everglades, anticipating if they ever got into the Okefenokee, that they would devastate the small mammal population and bird population like they've done in Florida.
Yeah.
Anything else then? Any final words, Cathy? Or
Yeah, I thank you very much for allowing me to come and share my swamp with you all. And I would like, I'll say to you that, even though it is a National Wildlife Refuge and it is protected by federal law, it still has threats. We saw that with DuPont, 20 years ago, wanting to mine the titanium out of Trail Ridge. And now here we are again, 20 years later with Twin Pines, trying to do the same thing. So there's always going to be threats, but it's up to us. If we are the ones that enjoy and value this area, we have to be vigilant, and we have to make sure that nothing happens to it that is not a natural occurrence. And mining titanium would be devastating for that area.
I do have one other question. Is there a time of year when the gators are more dangerous, more aggressive? I guess that somebody wants to know when they should take the tour and when they shouldn't.
Yeah. So the alligators, I've had so many contact with alligators, and only 3 have been negative. And it's young females. It's like new mothers that are just so uber protective. By the time you have the second kid or the second clutch of gators, it's like, yeah, go play in the street. I'm just kidding. But they're super protective of their young. And so I have had alligators that have actually attacked my canoe because I was trying to let a kayaker get around me, and he got stuck. And so it's not a you want to stay away from new mothers for sure, but and sometimes you just can't know that's what you're going to encounter. So when the hatchlings are just hatching out is usually at the end of summer, early fall. And so that's maybe the worst time, I guess, to be there. But you know, the summertime, you don't want to go in the summertime. It's just too hot and too buggy. I mean, it's just like terrible. The heat is so oppressive. In the springtime, the flowers are just, the orchids are blooming, the blue flag iris are blooming, the birds are spectacular. The songbirds are coming in, the prothonotary warblers, the parula warblers, and the gators are bellowing. I've had some really world-class snorers on my trips, and they've actually triggered the gators to bellowing, which is quite hysterical because they don't wake up, you know, they're snoring, right? But the gator finds that very attractive. So it's the right frequency. So they respond in kind. It's quite thrilling. And when you have a big bull gator underneath your platform bellowing, it's just a full body experience, because the frequency and the vibration, the ferocity or the intensity of the vibration is so loud and so strong that your whole body vibrates. It's quite the experience. That doesn't happen a lot, but when it does, it's quite thrilling. That's in the spring.
Well, it sounds like spring is the time to go then, before it gets too hot.
Yeah, spring is a beautiful. Okay. Yeah, I usually don't go in after the end of April. I think the window for me is now through end of April.
End of April. Okay.
Yeah. And you have to make your reservations 60 days out. They don't let you reserve any further than 60 days out.
So now would be the time, if people are planning on doing a trip, now would be the time to start thinking pretty seriously about it then.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
And you don't need a guide. You can do this yourself. You can just go into the swamp yourself. The trails are very well marked. But of course, what I provide is a narrative and stories.
All right. Well, we've had a couple of people thanking you for your presentation, and certainly I thank you as well. All of the board members on here, I'm sure as well. Got a thank you from Peter Jensen. Says thank you from -27 centigrade in Canada. So
oh goodness, oh my,
that's a little nippy.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I left Detroit and moved down here. So.
Well, thank you all. I appreciated you all tuning in.
All right. Well, thank you. And if there's no other comments, I think we're right at an hour here, a little bit more. So I think we can close it off. I will be posting this on the YouTube site. It takes me a couple of days to get it converted and posted up there. But if anybody wants to watch it, or if anybody didn't get a chance to, and you want to share that with a friend, just let them know. It's if you just go to YouTube and search Friends of the Savannah Coastal Wildlife Refuge, it'll take you to our site. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording and say good night to everybody. Good night. Thank you for joining us. And next month, actually, the February version, we're going to have Carolyn Brauer from the National Wildlife Refuge Association. That's our lobbying group in DC. And she's going to be talking about what's going on at a national level, budget-wise and policy-wise, that affects the National Wildlife Refuge system. That should be very interesting and informative. And in our March, actually tentatively scheduled for March, is that I had planned on doing a presentation on venomous critters that you might run into in our local refuges. It's a talk that I did for refuge staff a couple of years ago, but just an update on what kind of things you might run into and what to do about it in the refuges when you're out there. So I'm going to thank everybody again. I'm going to stop the recording and sign off, and we'll see you all next time.